Welcome to the 5th chapter of the book of 2Chronicles. You see here the temple as we showed it in the last video. Here I didn't see the lampstands, but now I can see that they're right inside. There was 5 of them. In the tabernacle there was 1, and there was 10 tables of showbread that were in here, and I'm not exactly sure where they're at. But in the tabernacle, there was only 1. And so we will now go into the text, and it begins, and all the work, ergasia, we have the ergonomics comes from that, ergasia, which Solomon did in the house of the Lord, was completed. They built this beautiful house building. And Solomon carried in the holy things of David, his father. Well, Solomon himself, I doubt if he carried it in himself, but he might have. And the holy things of David, his father, which were designed, and some of them they were made by David, and they're brought in, and the silver and the gold and all the items, and he put them in the treasury house of the Lord. Now, apparently there was a room, some sort of a place for put all these items in the temple. Excuse me. Then Solomon held an execclesiae, an assembly. We have ecclesia in Greek, iglesia in Spanish. A church has been translated into Kirche, I think, in German, church into English, but it was actually an assembly. We think of the Christian church as being some type of a hierarchical monarchy, as it had been for thousands of years with the Roman Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church. But we need to remember there was always an assembly of the people. The emphasis was on the assembling of the people to worship, to praise God, do obeisance to God, not for not for people to take the role of having everybody look at them and what they say. I go to churches today, and it's completely listening to a band, and it's like the last church I went to, I was like, the man thought he was Elvis Presley or something. And a lot of times I wonder if these church bands, if they weren't allowed to be seen, they had to play in the back like they were when I was a child, where I went to one of the major Protestant denominations. You didn't see people playing. The orchestra, or the choir, and the organists were all in the back. But it's changed. But here it goes. We see that it was an assembly. He held an assembly of all the presbyteros, the elders. A presbyteros, an older person, an elder of Israel, and all the archontos, the rulers of the phylon. The phylum is a derivative. An archon is a ruler and derivative. And igumenus, hegemony, comes from that, a rule of the patrion, the families. Paternal comes from that, of the sons of Israel in Jerusalem. So all these important people were all being called together in the assembly, and to do these things, to bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord from out of the city of David. This is Zion. Apparently, the the Ark of the Covenant was in the city of David. This is Zion. Zion is generally refers to the Temple Mount area, which the earliest city would have been upon, and this temple, and so it was very close to this temple. And every man of Israel was assembled unto the Vasileia, the king, in the holiday. This is the 7th month. We have derivative, menopause mean, so forth. The holiday would have been on the 23rd of Ethanim, which was the 7th month, also called Tishri, and in our calendar it would be September and October towards the end, where this feast was held. It wasn't a feast that says that God made it, but it was a feast that the people had for this celebration of the temple being open. And all the elders of Israel came, and all the Levites took the ark. So the ark was in that tent that David had made, and they went and got it, brought it, and they brought the ark and the tent of the testimony. The tent of the testimony had been in Gibeon, where they went earlier. Solomon went. Apparently it was dismantled in Gibeon and brought in to Jerusalem, and now the tent is probably the last we hear of it. I don't know what they did with it, but all the holy items in the tent, even the priests and the Levites brought it. So these things from the tent were now going into the temple, and a new type of place to gather for the people to praise and do obeisance to the God of Israel. And King Solomon, Vasilef Solomon, and all the synagogue, the gathering, there again it's a synagogue, is a gathering of Israel, and the ones being assembled unto him before the ark were sacrificing calves, moscus, we have a musk, ox, a musk, because a derivative, and sheep, which shall not be counted. Arithmetic comes from that, nor considered because of the plethus, the plethora, multitude. And the priests carried in the ark of the covenant of the Lord into its place, into the davir. And the davir is a Hebrew word. It's not a Greek word. It makes no sense in Greek. It's a transliteration from the Hebrew letters to the Greek letters, and from the Greek letters into the English letters, a double transliteration. Into the davir of the house. This is into the Holy of the Holies. So here we know the davir is what was called the Holy of the Holies, underneath the wings of the cherubim. Now, I always thought the cherubim were actually part of the ark, but apparently here they were separate because they were able to put them underneath the wings. A petrigon, Herovim is a transliteration. Petrigon, a peter, helicopter, comes from that, the peter. And the cherubim were being opened and spread out of their wings over the place of the ark. Now, it shows the cherubim in that picture as having 4 legs, and to me it seems like they just had 2 legs. I may be wrong, but it seems like that's what I remembered. And the cherubim covered the ark, and over its bearing poles on top. And the poles were to pick up the ark, went through these little round loops, and they would pick it up in the tabernacle. But apparently it wasn't. I don't know if it was picked up again. If it was after the temple was destroyed, we don't hear of it except for being in heaven. And the bearing poles projected, and the tips of the bearing poles were seen from the ark, from out of the holies, in front of the davir. So if you were there and you could see these tips of this ark from, if you were not in the Holy of Holies, right outside of it, but outside of that place they were not seen. And they were there until this day, whenever this was written. And not a thing was in the ark, except the 2 plaques, which Moses stationed at Horeb. And that's I underlined it because you can add that. I don't think I have that in, or it's in the English Derivatives book, but a plaque could be a derivative also. You can add that in there. So Moses put the 2 tablets of stone, but there's two things that were missing that were mentioned that were put in there, and that was the rod of Aaron that budded, and the bowl of manna from the wilderness were put in the ark, but they're not mentioned here. They're gone. Maybe when the ark went to Philistia, maybe they took the golden bowl out because it was worth a lot, and who knows what they did with the rod that budded. And it came to pass in the coming forth of the priests from out of the holy place, for all the priests being found were sanctified, for they were not then set in order according to the daily rotation. The daily rotation was set up by David, but apparently it hadn't really been put into practice. This is what I'm guessing what it's saying right here, and it was the beginning of the rotation of the things in the temple. And the Levites and the psalm singers, and that's there's a parenthetical phrase in there, and it came to pass in the coming forth of the priests from out of the holy places, and the Levites and the psalm singers, all with the sons of Asaph, with Heman and Jeduthun, and to their sons, and to their brothers, putting on apparels of fine linen, where the cymbals with stringed instruments. We'll go on. But Asaph was a man who was appointed by David to lead the singing with the men, and 12 psalms have his name in the title of the psalm, are his sons' names. So this Asaph and his sons were there, and they were Levites, and they were with the Kimvalis. We have a symbol, that's a transliteration there, and with stringed instruments, and with lutes, another stringed instrument, standing over against the altar. So they were all around, and with them 120 priests trumpeting with the trumpets. Now, these priests did not have horns. They were not a shofar. They were not horns, but they were metal trumpets that they used, and they were 120 of them. So this was quite an presentation to praise the Lord with all these trumpets and all these people with the instruments, stringed instruments. And there was one phony, a phone, sound. Phone is a derivative in the trumpeting and in the singing along with stringed instruments. It's interesting. There's one church I've heard of in the United States that they don't allow music to be played, which to me is not biblical at all. It's the opposite. It sounds like something the Pharisees would have come up with, but they didn't. Somebody in the modern day churches have come up with this instruments. Now, like I mentioned before, I don't think they should take the number one place in the praise, but people that would be praising them. But I suppose here they did. But a lot of the people didn't see this. This was done inside of the temple, and everybody had a job to do. And so, and there was one sound in the trumpeting and in the singing along with stringed instruments, and in the sounding out loud with one voice to praise and to make acknowledgement to the Lord. So this is wonderful. All these to make acknowledgement to the Lord. And as they raised up high the phonein, the voice, with the trumpets, and with the kimvalis, and with the organis. Here's another word you can add to the English derivative. It only appears in the Old Testament. Organis, we have where organ came from that. A musical instrument of some sort. Of the odes, instruments of the odes, an ode, odon, transliteration. And they said, make acknowledgement, or they sang, make acknowledgement to the Lord, for he is good. For into the eon is his mercy. So they are acknowledging that the Lord is good. Well, we should be doing the same thing. The Lord is good. He's been good to the people that love him. And his mercy is into the eon. Now, to this disobedient, that's not necessarily the case. But I believe to the obedient, the mercy of God is there. The Jews have went through a lot of tough times over since this was made 1,000 years before Christ, and all that period of time until this temple was destroyed, and then the Jews were sent throughout the world. Then they came back, and then again they were dispersed in the Romans, and then for 2,000 years, and they had a Holocaust with the Nazis, and then have come back into Israel today. And so going through a hard time, and I would imagine there would be times when you'd say, well, is the Lord good? We're going through all these. Where is the mercy of the Lord? Because we're going through all these hard times. But the Lord is good. It's been good to me and merciful. I deserve punishment, but instead I have mercy. Instead of punishing me, I am freed or allowed, I don't know what you would call it, overlooked. That's what basically mercy is. If you have a son and he should be spanked or something, discipline, but then again, you may have mercy and not do it. It would be mercy to the person, not maybe necessarily to you. And the house was filled up of the cloud and the glory of the Lord. And the priests were not able to stand to officiate before the face of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled up the house of God. In Exodus 40:34, the same thing happened with the tabernacle. It says, and the cloud covered the tent of the testimony, the tabernacle, and the tent was filled of the glory of the Lord. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the testimony, for the cloud overshadowed upon it, and the tent was filled of the glory of the Lord. So here again, with this new building, the Lord his glory has come into it. Chapter 6 continues with a not a monotone, but a single statement prayer by Solomon throughout this whole 6th chapter, and we will go in and hear what Solomon has to say in the 6th chapter in our next video seminar. I hope you'll join us. God bless.